Thank you very much for coming. My name is Jerry Torrison. I'm the director of the Veterinary Diagnostic Lab at the University of Minnesota. And we have a series of speakers, all from our very own Veterinary Diagnostic Lab. Lots of people have lots of good things going on all over the country and the world. And we thought we maybe would take this opportunity to talk about things we're doing right in our shop. And so I'm actually the first speaker. I won't introduce myself more than I already have, but I want to show you some things about a project that we've been working on for almost 2 years now, and it is now coming out. And so the exciting part is this will be available this week. If you come talk to me about getting a username and password, we can get you going, right, Paulo? And so this is a new application called LabSAVI. So what I want to do is give you a little background about how it came about and what we were thinking, then the objectives specifically for this project, and walk you through some of the capabilities at the end, okay? So we've got about 20-25 minutes for that. First, a little background on our information system at the Veterinary Diagnostic Lab. Through the leadership of Dr. Jim Collins and the efforts of Mary Thurn and others, it's actually been quite an innovative program. Every one of these things that are listed here over the years were the first time any major VDL had done any of this, and so it's been quite a progression over time to provide enhanced quality service through information management to our clients, and so we're very proud of what we've done. And of course, you only coast in one direction, and so we want to make sure that we continue to make progress, which leads to some funding that we got from our legislature to make an upgrade in our information system. In our discussions with our clients, there were a few things that came out in terms of what they wanted for internet access or information that they get from us. And so the feedback we got was that they didn't want to log in all the time, especially when they're driving down the road. Even if it's a minimum maintenance road, that can lead to trouble. Scrolling, schmolling, they didn't, even on a computer, didn't want to be spending a lot of wearing out of the wheels on the mouse. And so they wanted to limit the amount of scrolling. And anything that they wanted to look up, they wanted to get to in 3 clicks or less. So we sort of had that as our criteria going forward. And so this is a teaser for what isn't out yet. And so this is the upgrade for our information system and our web access that we're still a couple of months off with. But the information system will be truly platform compatible. In other words, you'll be able to look at it on your smartphone or your tablet or your computer and be able to see screens that are set up specifically for those platforms. And there will be lots of features that we'll talk about when it's out and ready, and that includes a little bit of scrolling, but the ability to click through and have access to it. And so, again, that's just a teaser because that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today we're talking about a smaller component of our upgrade to our information system. And again, in terms of background, so when I came back to the lab 3.5 years ago, Bob Morrison and I were talking about some of the information needs in the industry, specifically surrounding diagnostic information. This is Bob back in about 1988. This was when we had the first pseudorabies eradication symposium, international symposium hosted in St. Paul. And so these are scientists and researchers from all over the world at a farm in southern Minnesota, and Bob going over pig champ records with them. And so Bob and I went back a long, long ways. And so we had talked about things that he was doing and things that we could and should be doing at the lab. Bob and others at the College of Veterinary Medicine worked with a group in New Zealand called Epi Interactive, putting together a suite of applications called LabSAVI tools. And so Bob had been working with this group, and they had come up with some different components, including space-time analysis with map-based information, some genetic relationships, sequence information, also some movement capture, and then some cumulative incidents. And some of this wound up making its way into some of the MSHIMP work, the Swine Health Monitoring Program or project. Which is it? Project, program, I get them mixed up. And others were not finding a home, and so as we discussed it more, we decided that some elements of this would be good to work into an application that we thought could be useful for clients of the veterinary diagnostic lab. And so that's how we wound up coming up with a LabSAVI application. Okay? So that's the background. Now we'll talk a little bit about the objectives for this particular application. So we still want to honor the security of the VDL data, because this is VDL data that's feeding this, and we take our responsibility to keep it confidential very seriously. And so we want people to have secure access from anywhere, and so that is a very important element of what we do. We wanted to make it very simple to use. We wanted it to be quite intuitive and allow people to do the exploring that they want to do, but not have to do any sort of programming or designing tables or charts. Just use it. And so, as any programmer understands, making it simple to use is harder to program, but that was definitely the objective in what we were doing. And then finally, and importantly, we wanted to start small. And so here's my spoiler alert. This is not an all things to all people application that you can, it doesn't brown the food. It has a very limited scope in terms of what it can do. Partly that's from some of my experiences where I've seen a number of projects, very ambitious, with budgets with a lot of zeros after them that wound up not actually ever coming to fruition. We'd had a couple of mapping projects even at the University of Minnesota that never really gained traction. And so rather than invest tremendous amounts of money and come up with applications that people may or may not have wanted to use, we decided to start more humbly and come up with some applications that people had expressed an interest in being able to have. And so, for example, when I showed people from the LabSAVI tools the ability to compare PERS sequences, they said, I want that. And we said, okay, we'll build that into this application. And one of the most common requests we get for information from clients is antimicrobial susceptibility results. And so we decided to keep it quite limited. And so it does three things. It can tell you about PERS status for your farms. You can do comparisons of PERS sequence for different farms, and you can also summarize and look at trends for antimicrobial susceptibility. So again, intentionally keeping it fairly limited so that we can see if people take it up and use it, and if they do, and so here's the commercial portion of the message. The objective is to get your feedback to see what you like about it and future directions that you would like it to go so that we can build on it if there's interest. And if there's not, well, then we can add it to the scrap heap of software applications for veterinary diagnostics that really didn't take off. But we think it'll be intriguing. We think people will want to use it based on the feedback that we've had, and especially based on the input that we've had from practitioners and producers in trying to develop it. Okay, so what does it do? Or how does it do it? It does take our data directly from our laboratory information management system. It downloads about every hour, so it's quite current, and you can use it for checking results on, again, a limited scope of tests that might be available. And so here's all the cool stuff about it. It's written in the program R, which is an open access program, so that we can build onto it relatively easily. The graphical interface, the illustration, the visualization is through RStudio, which again is intended to not require a lot of manipulation on the part of the user. Just plug in what it is that you want to look at, and it'll pop it up. And so that's the foundation, the infrastructure of how it's built. Okay, So I've talked long enough, you kind of want to see it. So here's the interface. This is what you can look at when you pop it up, and a few features. There are some filters along the top. There are some choices for the direction that you want to go. And so it has on the left side the list. So these are cases that you can access. And on the right is a map. And so if you want to look up stuff based on the map, you can dive in and scroll in and do it that way. So here's a little example of choosing some filter options and how that winds up looking on the screen. So you choose your date range initially, let me see, and adjust it. If you go too wide, you'll get too many cases if you're going to do a per sequence analysis, for example, but you can limit it by other ways. So here's your location. You can pick your state. You can pick your county and limit the scope of the search that it's doing, and then wind up with that. And again, the procedure, if you're just focused on PERS PCR, you click there and apply it. And these are the cases that you have PERS PCR results for with that geographic distribution based on the date range that you chose. If you want to go in further and choose specific farms, you can make custom searches. If you want to, you can save these and name them. If this is a search that you're going to do because you go out to this farm every month and you want to summarize results, you can do it that way. If you want to just search based on specific samples, if you just want to look at what your PERS PCR results are, for example, for processing fluid, you can scope it down that fine and use that as your search parameter, and then again, save it as a search if it's something that you want to come back to for a future time. Okay? So based on all of those criteria, you wound up with one farm that had one case that came in. The little information buttons that show up on all these different things allow you to dig back further into the case, and so you can get more of the detailed information if you want on that case, or click out of it if you don't. So that's a pretty quick little skate through how you can set up your filters in order to access specific data that you're looking for. Okay? So filters and save search. If you'd rather just go right to the map, there are things you can do in the map. You can lasso an area of different size or dimension. You can scroll in and scroll out. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So here's the map. Scroll in. These balls represent cases. And so however many cases there are in that density of an area, that's represented by the numbers in there. And so this is an example of throwing a polygon around an area. If you want to look up all the cases in that area, to have them show up on the list to the left, or if you're going to do a PERS sequence analysis just in a defined geographic area, this is a tool for doing that. When you get down into a farm, it makes this pinwheel of the most, or of all the cases that are captured in that search. And then again, if you want to click on the pinwheel, that'll take you up to the details for the cases. You'll notice the color scheme for PERS. If there has been a positive PCR result in that case, it's red. If it's a green color, that means all the PERS PCR tests were negative. If it's a black dot in there, that means there were no PERS tests in that case. Okay? You can also throw a radius if you're a circular thinking person. You can define the radius of an area and again capture the cases within that area. If you want to measure on the map the distance, that's one of the mapping capabilities. Sometimes people are curious how far it is from one farm to another that you have access to. So again, this is only the farms and the cases that you're affiliated with as a VDL client. So you can set up that measuring tool and see how far away the PERS is or other farms are. Okay? So that's the map selection. Now if you want to go in and look on a specific farm or a specific case, again, we have filters that allow you to do that. And so you need to know the name of the farm, obviously, and you can conduct a search that way. and then if there are also other parameters that you've included in your submission information, such as flow or other parameters, you can go in and look up and click on the pinwheel, call up that case, or call up the range of cases and get more background information on it. So I think it's a very, again, intuitive, easy to use tool just to get in and look up cases very quickly and make some comparisons if you want. Okay? So again, more details on specific cases as needed. Okay, so then we can look at farm locations. Again, set your parameters. Maybe you just want to know what farms have I sampled recently, and so you define a narrow scope of dates and see which farms you've actually had samples or screening or monitoring done, and so this is a way to have that represented graphically. And again, the color scheme gives you an indication of the testing results just for that defined period. So it's a way to filter and look, and again, look up cases. I think you're getting the idea here on how to navigate around. How about susceptibility profiles? If people are curious about what antibiotics have been effective, there are a couple different ways of doing this. One is you can look at all the VDL data by isolate, so by bacterial species, and by antibiotic. Or if you want, you can have a filter that compares all the VDL data against particular farm systems or flows, and so you can filter it that way. So here we click on the susceptibility profile. We can, typically you would pick a pathogen. It wouldn't be all pathogens. In this demo model, it shows all pathogens, so you wind up with not just susceptible, intermediate, resistant, but a blend that includes no interpretation. If there is no breakpoint for an antibiotic and pathogen combination, it's still shown as no result or no interpretation. And so that will be a continuing annoyance to people until we have breakpoints for everything. But you can filter by date range, you can filter by specimen. So if you just want to know the brain, Streptococcus suis, particular antibiotics, you can look at that. Or you can look at time series. So you can look at changes over time. As an example, click the time series, and again, normally you would pick a pathogen. This one is just all pathogens, so it's not really a meaningful interpretation, but it gives you a trend line, and you can pick your antimicrobials and choose separate farms if you would like. One of the issues is you have to have enough cases for it to be able to make an analysis, and so if you refine your search too fine, it'll come back and say you just don't have enough to be able to see what's going on. Okay? So trend line can be interesting. As we've observed, mostly they're flat, so that's pretty good. We don't see too much resistance developing. Okay, and the last one I want to show is the genetic analysis. So if there have been PERS or 5 sequences made on these cases, you can have different ways to analyze that. So you can do a genetic analysis, and you can set up different options for a quick sort. So the most recent 20 cases, again, this isn't all things to all people. We can't do 1,000 sequence dendrograms. This is designed to be able to be something you can look at on a smaller device or on a computer screen. And so we put a maximum of 20 sequences because normally people want to ask a specific question about some sequences. Is it the same as vaccine? Is it the same as the last isolate I had in the farm? So you can decide whether or not you want to compare it against vaccine isolates or not. You can filter those in or out, and you can build different types of dendrograms. You can have the dots shown up on top, or you can choose to have it labeled with the farm name or the case ID. So there's some flexibility depending on how you like to look at your information. And then do a print screen to make that an exportable image that you can use in a report if that's helpful. Okay? Or you can set them up as a distance matrix, sort of the homology table, and also have that exportable as a comma-separated value file. again with the different types of labels depending on how you like it, or a distance map, and this allows you to look geographically. So the case example is the orange one. That's the one you're comparing it against. And the density of the color relates to the percent homology. So the darker the dot is, the more closely related it is to the virus from that case farm. Okay? There are ways to go in and get the FASTA file for the sequence. If you have sequences that aren't part of our database, you can add them in as a FASTA file. So there's a way to just open it up and import a sequence and name it and store it for your future searches. And then, again, there's this similarity table and timeline at the end if you'd like. And you can always go back and dig into specific cases as a reminder for how you came up with those. Okay? So that's where we are today. We're rolling that out as of now. We don't have a big media splash on it because we're trying to sort of have a soft rollout with some people trying it. If you would like to try this with your data, contact me and we'll get you your username and password set up. We think it's a pretty scalable platform based on the type of programming that we did. We're even now applying for some funding to try and develop some poultry applications, see how that goes. And especially would like your input for things you like and don't like about it, or things that you think would be good next steps for features that you really, really would like to see us develop, but we don't have built in yet. And we'd like to thank the state of Minnesota for giving us some money to do this. Some people who gave us some thoughtful ideas, Bob Morris and Andres Perez early on. A lot of people at the VDL worked on this together, and it was through some great input from clinics and producers in the state that got us where we are today. And I've got 2 minutes for